Yes, I do.
He's kind of impervious to that. I put earplugs in and did that for 10 minutes. Rabbi Koppel left. Literally 10 straight minutes. He didn't move. I was like, we both knew he was awake. But,
Whoa.
I was just, I had a lot more respect for the guy after.
It's called Am Kashay Oref, a stiff-necked nation.
Exactly. I would have got up.
The only derogatory name he's ever called us.
We're on? Are we live? No, it's okay.
Yeah, we're live.
Are we live?
Yeah.
Okay. All right, quick review. We didn't cover too much ground inside yesterday, so it should be a short review. Ani ledodi v'dodi li rosh tevas elul. Speaking about the idea that an elul, it begins an arousal from below, which then creates a reciprocation on Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, which is an arousal from above. And we said this is what it means, smolo tachas l'roshi, his left hand is under my head. We said that this left hand represents the revelation of the gevuras that come out on Rosh Hashanah at the time of the Nasira. What's the Nasira?
Dividing bottom and bottom.
Right, the separation. So Hashem is basically going to bring out his malchus, which means he's going to create the other. In order to do that, it requires an act of gevura. That gevura then is shining upon the entire creation in a very intense way, and it throws fear onto all the worlds, fear and dread, the lower worlds, the higher worlds, also onto the souls of Israel, that we suddenly feel this intense level of fear of God, which again is coming sort of as an arousal from above. Right? Hashem is doing that. But we ourselves have to essentially create an arousal from below in order to be kalim for this, in order to bring it out. Because we said that fear and love are not really planted in the hearts of man from himself, or Hashem has to give us this dose of fear, and that will be our package of fear for the entire year. So whatever you receive on Rosh Hashanah, in terms of your fear, this is what's going to be your godly soul's, dose for the entire year. And then we said this is what it means v'dodi li, that my beloved comes to me. Who remembers what it means that the smolo tachas l'roshi, but that was the left hand. What did we say that it meant that the left hand was under the head, specifically? We did say that, but then we sort of deepened it a little bit. The head doesn't only represent Rosh Hashanah. When is the left hand actually under the head? Is it on Rosh Hashanah or Yom Kippur? Why? What happens on Yom Kippur where we include the head? And what does the head mean?
Judgment?
No, the smolo tachas l'roshi, the left hand is the judgment, right? Yeah?
It's often the Gevurah.
It sweetens the gevura. How does the head sweeten the gevura?
Oh, because you understand what the purpose of the Gevurah is.
He had his hand up. He just
sorry.
No, it's good. In Norway, they're mamish polite in class. That's what it is. So you're right. The head represents, in this case, when I always learned this mimer, I always thought that the smolo tachas l'roshi meant a connection of Rosh Hashanah with the left, like you said. I sort of investigated a little bit more this year. I had some time in the break, look into the Meir Makomos and everything, the Zohar. It turns out really the left hand under the head, is the sweetening of the left, which happens at Yom Kippur. Why? Because in Yom Kippur there's this revelation of Bina, right? Bina is sort of called the Olam HaCherus. It's called like the world of freedom. Why Bina is called the world of freedom? Because Bina is really the eighth sphera, if you think about it from below to above. Right? It goes out of the whole measure of 7, which is the boundaries of nature. So on what's that?
So it's a left brain.
Okay, true. And then on Yom Kippur, there's this revelation of that which is beyond. Okay, primarily which is the sweetening the gevuras, which is the as we said in Bina, when there's a grand understanding, then you can see how the gevuras were not there to create judgment and pain and fear, but rather it was in order to create the other so that the other could reconnect, right? And this is what we said, that the idea of echad, if you recall yesterday, what's the unique teaching that we learned about echad yesterday? I found to be very exciting. Beautiful, right? Echad, Aleph, Ches is 9. Dalid is Malchus, but they're one. So the whole point of basically is of the separation of the Melech, which is the sphere of Malchus, which comes through all these Gevuras, is not in order to create separation. It's not for the sake of the Tzimtzum. It's for the sake of the reunification of the other with the one, to create Echad, And when this happens, there is the small goes under the head, and there's this grand revelation. But in the meantime, right, until Yom Kippur, you have this dread and fear. These are the 10 days of Tshuva because the person is in a state of fearing Hashem. Okay, yeah.
Two questions. The first one is
Why is Daled Malchus?
Yeah.
In general, because it's like the fourth leg of the Merkava. It's right. You have like Avram, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, or Zah, right? They represent, and then the completion of this, David, is like the fourth leg. So you have basically 4 levels of the Merkava. Daled is 4, represents like this sort of the last part of the Merkava. And there's other reasons basically, but the Daled is also Malchus can either be Daled or Hey, right? Depending on whether it's been enriched. It's a very actually long, complex thing, but in short, we see in the Shema, right, that it says you're supposed to meditate on the Aleph, which is Elufo Shel Olam, right, the God. The Aleph is Elufo, means the master of the world. What's the Ches represent? The Ches represents the heavens and the earth, the 7 heavens and the earth. This is very important. You're supposed to think about this every single time you say Shema. So if this is the first time you're hearing this, in halacha, this is not a Kabbalistic thing. This is how you say Shema. You're supposed to think about these 3 things. The Alufo Shel Olam, the Ches is the 7 heavens and the earth. And the Daled is the Daled Rucho Shel Olam. It's the Daled is like the 4 directions of the earth. So it represents Malchus, which is like the Kli holding the space of the 4 directions of the world. And that's why in the Shema itself, the last word of the Echad is like a big giant Daled, right? Of Echad. In the Torah, it's a big, because it's supposed to represent the essentially Malchus that you're supposed to meditate on, it being the 4 directions of the world. Yeah. Yeah.
The
Second question.
In passing, you mentioned that Bina is the 8th sphere if you come from below to above. Why not the 9th?
Why would it be the 9th? Because of Das, you're saying?
Yeah.
Because again, we don't really count Das very often in a lot of counts, right? There's for example, when we talk about the 10 spheres aligning with the 4 letters of Hashem's name, which we do pretty much every day in this class, right? Chochmah is the Yud, Bina is the Hey, and then you have the 6th from Chesed to Yesod is the Vav. Where's Das? It's like not in the picture. Also, we oftentimes say there's 10 spheros, right? And if you really count, there's actually 11 spheros. If you count Keser and Das, we always specifically say there's not 11, there's 10, because Das and Keser can be sort of switched. When the Das is in there, it means the Keser, which is a Makif, has been internalized, and when there's no internalization of the light, it stays in a Makif, then the Keser is the 10th sphere. So essentially, Das is sort of a functional sphera, which it serves to bind other things together. It's like a glue between the actual pieces of the puzzle. So it's not always counted in the spheres. Bina represents therefore the 8th from below to above. Okay, any more questions? We ride. So this is V'dodili. My beloved is to me that you get this outpouring of fear of God at that time. But this needs to be sort of summoned, and that is a job that we have to do, and that's basically the work of Elul. The arousal from below, which takes place in Elul, the Ani Ladodi, is a requirement in order to get to this Dodili. Fine. Then we start to explain, and this is where we kind of got cut off yesterday, that there's the level of the 13 attributes of mercy that express themselves in the month of Elul. This is what we spoke about yesterday. What are the 13 attributes of mercy? I'll ask the question again, in the simplest sense.
God's compassion towards us?
What's that?
God's compassion towards us?
Yeah, we see that these 13 statements of mercy were taught to Moshe when he thought that the schus of the avos was going to run out. Right? He was praying for mercy from Hashem in the merit of the forefathers. Hashem said to him, "I see you're praying in the merit of the forefathers. Try this." Because that's merit based on man, right? And it's good. I don't think it ever ran out until today. But theoretically, it's based on their deeds and their righteousness. Here's a mercy that's based on just it's like Hashem, and since Hashem is infinite, also His attributes are infinite, and therefore, if you really need mercy, call upon these.
Wait, Hashem gave?
Hashem taught Moshe the 13 attributes of mercy. Yeah.
That was the exact words you said?
What's that?
That came direct from God.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes. Yeah.
But those were the exact words that Moshe says Hashem when in Chedera?
That Hashem said to Moshe, basically, right? He said, say these words, basically. This is what Moshe prayed with, and this is what Hashem taught him to say. So the idea that we said was that the fact that it's Hashem's mercy means it's these 13 attributes of mercy come from a level which is completely beyond nature, right? And beyond the Seder Ishtalshlus in every way. So let us, we said one more piece that we kind of left off on yesterday, which was what's the connection to the beard? Because we said that the 13 attributes of mercy are also called the Yud Gimel Tikune Dikna, the 13 points and strands of the beard. So what's the association of the 13 attributes of mercy with the beard hair? So we said that the whole notion of hair in Chassidus is a very deep one, Kabbalah. Hair means contraction, primarily because you have, let's say, for example, the brain, right, which is the most, let's say, the seat of the soul and the most vibrant reality of godly energy that's contained in the body. And then what happens is you have the very least amount of energy and life force that comes right out of the hair, which is essentially coming from the brain. It says in Chassidus that the brain energy actually produces the hair, right? But it goes through the blockage of the skull, and therefore it has this tremendous tzimtzum from the greatest energy to the least. Now the hair can mean two things. There's two types of contractions. One contraction, which is the normal way we think of contraction, is that the mashpia really only gives over his chitzonius and like the external of the external into the makabel, and that's sort of the difference between the God and the world. Whatever God puts into the world, it comes through these hairs because the world can't handle the actual intensity of godliness, not even a slight drop of it, and therefore there's this intense contractions which represent basically gevuras and tzimtzumim, right? And so the mashpia sort of stays in his dimension, and the makabel is in a completely different dimension, which is almost like disassociated, right? However, there's also a type of hair, which once those midos of the world were created, then you have something wondrous which happens, which Hashem can do anything. So He can actually create a situation where the pure energy of the essence itself can also be filtered into the creation. And this is what you call the 13 attributes of mercy, the beard hair as opposed to the hair of the head. There's a difference between the hair of the beard. If you notice, it's a Jewish minhag to cut your hair on the top of your head and not touch your hair on the bottom of your head, right? What's the story with that? It's because there are two different types of hair, right? There's certain hairs that represent a contraction for the sake of contraction, which is basically creates the other. And then there's the hair of the beard, which are like thicker hairs, physically, because the idea is that there's like sort of like a tube inside, which its function is to then import the infinite light from above into that newly created world of midos. So even though the 13 attributes of mercy are called Yud Gimel Midos, Harachamim, Midos means measurements, it's not the same type of doling out of measurements which was used to create the world. That was in order to just create something finite. These measurements are created in order to import infinite into finite. And this is what the 13 attributes of mercy are. They're basically a transference of divine light which is above the creation. In other words, you could say Bina, or what happens on Yom Kippur, right, where there's this outpouring of the Echad and the oneness that we spoke about before, which is from beyond creation, and it pours into creation. It creates a oneness with creation. The ultimate time which this is really seen is essentially Yom Kippur. Yom Kippur, he's going to mention inside in a second. We open up the ark and we say the 13 attributes of mercy 3 times in a row, and all through, right, we're basically, that's like the pinnacle high point of all things. That is when the 13 attributes of mercy have done their role in completion, because what, again, was the point of all that left? The left that we spoke about a minute ago was the idea of the first level of hairs. Like the midos, just to create finite. And this creates dread because all of a sudden you're finite, you have sudden realization that there's a king over you, right? Because you've been created, you're like the kingdom, and the majesty of the king is scary to you. When you get, this happens on Rosh Hashanah, the coronation day, right? But when you get to Yom Kippur, what do we say? That there's sort of a oneness that takes place in creation. He sweetens the Gevuras, which means he makes this separation feel as though it's echad, right? He binds it all together. Why? Because he draws forth the attributes of mercy and makes the finite world enlightened and illuminated with the truth of beyond the creation. And this happens on Yom Kippur. However, what we're saying now is that the 13 attributes of mercy are shining in Elul. And this is actually a question which the entire mimer is based on. According to what we just said, we don't seem to have this power of reunification and the infinite light shining into the world until Yom Kippur, when the Gevuras are sweetened. Why are we finding that the 13 attributes of mercy are shining in Elul? I'm jumping the gun a little bit, but this is what the question, the leading question. Yeah.
So the beard is 13 attributes of mercy, and then so when you said it like it channels through, is that us getting the mido, or is that Hashem's mido reflecting onto us?
It's Hashem's infinite light coming into the dimension of midos,
Right.
which is kind of a chiddush.
So is that giving us rachamim, or is it?
Yeah.
So it's giving us rachamim.
Yeah.
Not receiving. Like we're not receiving rachamim from Hashem.
What's the difference? Yeah, we are receiving rachamim
So
from
does
Hashem.
it give us rachamim? Like, am I gonna have more rachamim on someone if I have a beard, as opposed if I cut my beard?
No, it's a kli for you to receive Hashem's rachamim.
Okay.
Yeah.
So someone with unfortunately, like someone who can't grow a beard, let's say,
Right.
doesn't get any rachamim from Hashem.
We spoke about this yesterday, and someone brought out women, and said, well, what about women? They don't grow a beard.
Yeah.
So the truth is, I was thinking about this. It came into my mind this morning when I woke up. It's good. I must have had a good day in yeshiva yesterday. That the truth is that as much as this is like basically the greatest thing since sliced bread, we're explaining how you can have infinite light in a finite world through these 13 attributes of mercy. What could be greater than that? What could be greater than that is what happens before the hair, right? The actual essence itself, which is like beardless. In fact, these little spots on the face, which are called the tapuchim, right? They're like the apples of your face. They're the baldy part of your cheeks. Kabbalah explains that this is even like a higher level than the beard, because the beard is an extension from the essence. Usually, in order to get the essence in a finite world, you need to have some kind of a mechanism called the 13 attributes of mercy, which can fit infinite into this finite thing. But you're still getting that through an extension from the essence, right? So the woman, like lack of beard, and theoretically, I guess you could say in a positive sense, someone who can't grow a beard, maybe, they're dealing with the sort of essence itself, right? It's like, because if you think about it, the Zah and the whole attributes of mercy is connected with the man. The man is like a hamshacha from above to below, which is a high thing. But in Chassidus, we speak frequently about the idea that the tachton, the woman, which represents the bottom, right? Even though she's fallen to a lower state, in reality, inside of her is the essence is contained. That's why basically when the man marries her, he unleashes something which is actually higher than him. She becomes, in a certain sense, his mashpia, as we learn from the mimer, right? It's just that it's hidden. So inside of this woman, she contains the essence, if it could be unlocked. Just like the earth contains the essence of Hashem, if it can be unlocked. So therefore, ultimately, the lack of beard has a different maila, right? On a negative sense, the lack of beard means there's no way to bring the essence forward because it doesn't have the capacity for this mechanism of extending itself. On the positive sense, it doesn't have to extend itself because it's already the essence, right? It's just it has to. So that's where the man and woman go well together. He basically brings down the shefa to unlock that it's already there in the bottom. Yitzchak, you following along? Okay. So let's go back inside. He says, Hine no the shebe elul whose man he's galus yud gimel rachami, 4 lines from the bottom. There's a little comma. This is where we left off yesterday. You see the word midos harachamim. Anyone see Yehoshua?
I saw him pass through.
He was here, right? Okay. Lahavin ze, you see where we are, 4 lines from the bottom? Everybody? Yeah? David, you have a copy? Take a copy. Okay, Lahavin ze, so we have to understand, Lama hem yemosachol. The big question is, if the 13 attributes of mercy are shining in Elul, why are they weekdays? Why are they regular days? Right? Einam Yom Tov. Why isn't it Yom Tov? Kamo Shabbasos v'Yom Tov, like Shabbos and Yom Tov, Shemiz Galus Elukus b'chinas ha'aras Elukus Yizbarech, which those days are an extra shine of godliness, that the rays of godliness are shining in this world. Why don't we do malacha on Shabbos and Yom Tov? Right? Because this notion of us being in a state of separateness from Hashem, and therefore having to sort of like construct and be in the malacha mode. What's the malacha that we do on Shabbos and Yom Tov? The 39 malachas. It's the idea of action, right? That we're basically going down into this state of separation, that we do all these works of action, right? On Shabbos, the whole world elevates like out of that state of action, right? There's the idea of intellect and emotion and action, right? The realms of intellect and emotion are higher spiritual dimensions. When Hashem has to contract himself all the way down to the world of action, it means there's a tremendous state of separation to go into the realm of action. So we as Jews comply, and we do like holy actions. What is the holy action that we do during the weekday? Essentially build the mikdash, right? Because those 39 things that we're not allowed to do on Shabbos is because those are the 39 things that we do to build a mikdash during the weekday. Because you don't build the mikdash on Shabbos. So when we go down to the realm of action, we're bringing godliness into the realm of action. How do we do that? We basically use these physical objects to create holiness. But on Shabbos and Yom Tov, you don't build the mikdash anymore. Because godliness doesn't fall down that far into a state of separation, into a realm of action. Everything elevates into the realm of thought, speech, or even thought, right? Which means the world is being amplified with a level of godliness which doesn't allow for that state of intense separation. Because there's a shine from the 13 attributes of mercy, and the world is sweetened and elevated, doesn't feel separate. So it's like, just stop your action. There's no concept of such a level of separation. You follow me? That's what it says. Sheishis yamim asa Hashem es hashamayim va'aretz. 6 days, asa is lashon asiya. Hashem made the world, right? V'yom hashvi Shabbos v'yinafash. On the 7th day, he stops. Where does he stop? He doesn't stop creating the world, really, because there's still a world on Shabbos. He just stops creating at the level of asiya, which means that extra contraction, which makes us feel totally disconnected and separated. He doesn't go that far down because there's a shine from infinite light, which like brings the world to a state where we are connected, right? So this is due to the fact that there's 13 attributes of mercy shining. So if the 13 attributes of mercy are shining in Elul, why aren't we in a month-long holiday? There's some kind of a contradiction going on here. You follow? Okay, Noam?
So if like seems that on Shabbos the worlds get a trim, that everything's the same except Asiya is taken out of the equation. I thought that the soul is elevated into a state of Bria. Maybe I'm misremembering, but I think so.
Say it again, what?
The soul is elevated to a state of Bria on Shabbos, as opposed to Yetzirah. And I thought if you only remove Asiya, then it would logically be elevated only to a state of Yetzirah, but that is not elevated to a state.
It's true, it's just that what does Asiya represent? Asiya represents action, Yetzirah represents speech, and Bria represents thought, right? The lower 3 worlds are thought, speech, and action. So the thing is that really, in truth, let's have like a little parentheses lesson, which is kind of cool stuff for a second, right? What's going on is when Hashem creates the world, right? It says, Baruch sha'amar b'haya olam. Blessed is he who spoke and the world came into being. So as far as Hashem is concerned, the world is created with speech, not action. Right? Because when Hashem's speech is considered action. When he speaks, it happens, right? Because what is speech? Speech is the letters of creation coming from inside of Hashem's thought to outside of Hashem's mouth. Once there's an inside-outside experience with these letters of creation, there's already something outside. There's already a creation that takes place, which is not one with God anymore. Because the speech exits, we're using metaphors obviously for God, but something exits Hashem, called his speech, and now there's like an independent thing that's not him. That's why we use the word, the notion of speech, to infer this idea of something happened outside of God, so to speak, right? Now, what's about action? We just said a second ago, Sheshis Yamim Asa. Hashem made, Lashon Asiya, which means he actually makes it. The thing is, if you look at what Asiya versus Dibur, action versus speech, in a person, here's the difference. When I take a deed, let's say I throw a ball. So the energy that I had in my body is now being contained in that ball, making it go against gravity, etc. Or if I'm going to draw a painting or make an essay, I'm going to write it down and give it to you and walk away. Which means that the energy that was in my body, I have essentially, it has exited the building to the point that it doesn't need me anymore. It exists independently of me. After I throw the ball, I can turn around and walk away. The ball is now taking my energy, and it's holding it independent of me, right? Whereas when you speak, we're talking about live speech. When you speak, the speech is continuously flowing out of the speaker. So even though there is a state of separateness involved, but it's a separateness which is always connected. It doesn't actually go and become completely independent. You see the difference between speech and deed? So when Hashem creates the world, he only ever creates it by the way of speech. Because the world never really is truly independent of Hashem. This is what the Alter Rebbe says in the second book of Tanya. Like mud covers the eyes of someone who thinks that the world was created in a way of a craftsman who puts his object in the store and walks away. Because Hashem never disconnects himself from creation. It's rather Mechadish b'chol yom tamim ma'aseh b'reishis. He's constantly speaking it into existence. You with me so far? Now that speaking into existence is the emes way that the world is created. Only what? As far as we are concerned, it seems like Hashem made something. Because Hashem is speaking it with such a type of speech that in the feeling and the minds of the creation, we feel like he put this thing here and went away. We do not feel the continuous revelation of God enlivening the world. Now I'll give you one more parenthesis inside of a parenthesis, which is that in Eretz Yisrael versus Chutz La'aretz, there's a difference between the way Hashem makes the world. And this is why we call this the Holy Land. And its borders are like exactly defined, right, in the Holy Torah of Moses. Because in Eretz Yisrael, he does create the world continuously through speech, and he doesn't take it into the state of action. And therefore, if you're paying attention even a slight bit, you can actually experience yourself being spoken by Hashem at every second. You feel yourself independent, but not an independence as though Hashem walked away. That's what it means. Einei Hashem elok tamid, einei Hashem elokecha ba. Hashem's eyes are always on it. What does that mean, right? Isn't Hashem watching everything? There's a special hashgach and oversight into this world that he's making in such a way where you can actually feel his presence in this land at every second. As soon as you walk out of those boundaries, the experience of creation becomes like an action. It feels to the people outside of Eretz Yisrael that he put the world here and walked away. It feels to them. But it's not really true, but it feels that way. So when we say Hashem has thought, speech, and action, really by Hashem's count, he only has thought and speech. But the way that we experience the speech outside of Eretz Yisrael, and I guess inside of Eretz Yisrael if you're not tapped in, right, is also through this a further contraction of action. So far, are you with me? You with me so far? I'm about to answer your question.
So sorry, I was in my own world.
Oh, were you now? All right, well that's not good because this is an answer to your question. In any case, on Shabbos, what happens? I mentioned that Hashem doesn't go into the realm of action. The reality is Hashem never really goes into the realm of action. Right? We just established that. So Hashem, when he stops doing his work, as far as Hashem is concerned, his work is speech. That's how he creates the world. And so he rests from speech, which means that, you're right, it also goes out of Yetzirah and into a state of Bria. What does that look like? Bria is thought. So Hashem, on Shabbos, both in Israel and out of Eretz Israel, he's creating the world from thought, which means the world does not actually exit him. There's an experience in creation that we're mamash inside of Hashem. This is what Shabbos is. That's why malacha of action is prohibited. And guess what else is prohibited? Malacha of speech. You're not allowed to say malacha words. You can't say we're gonna go and finish up this building project tomorrow. You can't speak about malacha either, because Hashem rests from action and speech, and we're supposed to parallel Him in this way. Why? Because on Shabbos and Yom Tov, we're literally living inside of Hashem's brain. Like the experience of out and in goes away, and we're in a state of oneness. Again, if you're tapped in, you can feel these things, right? Keeping Shabbos, in other words, taps you in. Now, if that's the case, again, all of this is happening because there's an extra measure of infinite light which is being injected into the world during that time, which removes or sweetens the Gevoras. And that's accomplished by the 13 attributes of mercy. If the 13 attributes of mercy make that happen, then why is Elul a weekday? Because the 13 attributes of mercy shine also now. This is what he just asked.
I don't understand though how Rachamim goes into Asiya though. Like
How what?
How 13 minutes of Rachamim, how that connects Asiya to action.
It undoes the realm of action, right? If you have Asiya, it means you have a feeling of separateness, right? Action is no for separate. You can put it in the store and walk away. It's like there's something that exists independently. Well, when the 13 attributes of mercy are there, that experience is not supposed to be had. Because that notion of separateness, which comes from the contractions, is supposed to be sweetened and repaired by this extra injection of divinity from above the world, thus making the world feel as though it's inside of Hashem's mind, not having been spit out and feel separate. So there's a contradiction between the 13 attributes of mercy shining and there being a weekday, a world of action. And what he's saying here is, but that's Elul. Elul is this weird contradiction, where the 13 attributes of mercy are officially shining according to Kabbalah and everything. Right? And we learn this also from, you guys don't have the book, but the pasuk says, Ani ladodi v'dodi li haroe b'shoshani. In the Shir HaShirim, in other words, how do we know there's such a thing as the 13 attributes of mercy shining at this time? Right? We learn it from this next few words after Ani ladodi v'dodi li, which says, he pastures amongst the roses. Right? Remember, this is officially a love story that Shlomo Melech is writing. It's like, I'm to my beloved is to me. Like, imagine just like pasturing amongst the roses, right? But the word Shoshanim, which means roses, is the idea that there's the 13-petaled rose. You ever heard of this? So since a rose has 13 petals, from here we learn that when he's busy with Ani Ladodi V'Dodi Li, which spells Elul, there's this magic relationship is produced, the 13 attributes of mercy. Right? So, but anyway, you follow? So the point is they don't go together, the 13 attributes in a sea, and yet they do, because in Elul, it's a weekday, we're still busy with malacha, but the 13 attributes of mercy are shining. There's a problem here. We have to solve this. Ubifrat, second last line from the bottom of this paragraph, Ubifrat particularly, Be'esus man you'd give him midos, right? Particularly when the actual moment comes, when the 13 attributes are shining, right? Which is, we're talking about, let's say Shabbos and Yom Tov, they're generally hanging around. But on, let's say, Yom Kippur, we open the ark and we actually scream out with the whole congregation 3 times, the Yud Gimel Midos, right? Then that is like the moment of total revelation of this higher plane. Shema Ares Elyonos, these are very high lights. Like we said, they come through the beard, the pure Ein Sof. Vehem Elyonos Mi'od, Vehem Mizgalim B'Yom Kippurim. When do they really come out? That's what happens on Yom Kippur. As we explained before, that the Gevoras, which start on Rosh Hashanah, get sweetened in their fullness, Tachas L'Roshi, when they come under the head, the Bina, and get sweetened. This is this whole experience of the full power of the Yud Gimel Midas Rachamim, when they shine more than ever, is on Yom Kippur. Uvada yesh hefresh gadol ben Yom Kippur ben Elul. And he says, certainly there's a huge difference between Yom Kippur and Elul. That's like the moment of the greatest lack of malacha that you can have, right? And here, the same thing is happening in Elul, and it's a regular weekday. So what gives? That is the question. Now, this next piece, I guarantee you've heard this story before, but you probably haven't heard, most people don't realize, is that this whole story is to attempt to answer that very question we just asked. And what is this story? Ach hine yuvan al pi mashal lamelech. We can understand this by way of an analogy. No, go back. Of a mashal lamelech, right? An analogy for a king. You have it on the phone there. special, you're going to be tested. Top of the second paragraph. Let me show them where we are. Osios machkimos says the letters make you wise. You have to pay attention to the letters. Alpi mashal melech shekodem bo leir yotzin anshe ha'ir likraso makablim panav besade. An analogy of the king that before he comes to the city, all the people of the city go out to greet him, and basically makabel panav means to greet him in the field, right? And at that time, anyone who wants to is allowed to go out and greet the king in the field. And the king will receive them all with a happy countenance, right? And he will show them a laughing face, right? A joyous laughing face to all. Right, this is the famous mashal of the king is in the field. Who's heard of this before? That in Elul the king is in the field. This comes from this page of the Alter Rebbe. Right, it's like a Baruch Hashem. It's a nationwide. Has become synonymous with the month of Elul. In Elul, the king is in the field. Hashem is so easy to find. How do you know? From page Lamed Beis of Likutei Torah. Right, and what he's explaining is this is an analogy to answer the question: what? Why Elul, the 13 attributes of mercy are shining, but it's still a weekday, right? So he explains this by way of analogy. That it's like a king who's in the field, meaning what? How is that an analogy for that? Let me finish the analogy. We're still in the middle. Think about it. When the king then goes to the city, all the people go after him, right? They went out, before he went to the city, they went to greet him in the field. Now he goes to the city, they all go after him. And afterwards, when he finally gets to his kingly chambers, then not everyone can get in. You can only get in if you have permission. Remember, in the field, anyone who wants can go see him. But now he comes to his palace, only those who have permission can go in. And even those who have permission to go in, they're not just any old guy who can get permission. You have to be what's called the muvcharim sheba'am, which means the chosen of the people, and yechidi segula, very, very treasured individuals. They're the only ones that get in to see the king. That is the mashal. So what kach ha'inyan al derech mashal, so it is by way of analogy in the Chodesh Elul. Yotzin lahakbil or panav yisbarach b'sada. You can go out and receive his face in the field. Now, how does that answer our question? You have an answer?
Oh, no, sorry.
You're just stretching your hand there?
Oh, I accidentally stepped on someone's foot, so it wasn't apologetic.
Who knows why this mashal, who can explain to us why this mashal answers our question? First, someone repeat the question. What's the question that we're trying to answer? Please, someone be able to do this. Beautiful. Beautiful. That's the question. And this analogy is now an answer to that. How?
Because when you're out in the field, it's a much, much less strong version as when the king's in the palace. I guess it's still you're going to do Rahman, but it's a completely different world version of Kippur when it's an actual palace version of Yom Kippur.
Beautiful. The king in this analogy represents then what then?
The king is Rahman.
He's the 13 attributes of mercy in the analogy. Right? The 13 attributes of mercy in this analogy is the king who's found in the field. And the idea is, what's the story when the king is found in the field? He's basically he's dressed down. By the way, we're going to read 2 Maimarim from the Rebbe on this Maimer. It's a very, very classic Maimer. And the Rebbe has several Maimarim on this Maimer. So many of the explanations that I'm giving are from the Rebbe. And one of the things the Rebbe explains is, what's the difference between the king in the field and the king in the palace? The king in the field, he doesn't throw fear on people so much, because when you're in his entourage and his palace and all the people around him, you see his majesty more. When he's in the field, he wears different clothes. He doesn't have his crown on his head. Why would he have the crown in the field? It's the precious crown jewels. So essentially, it's the same 13 attributes of mercy, but they're dressed down. And this is kind of what actually Yoshua was asking yesterday, right? About this notion of, can I just say these attributes whenever I want to? And then Hashem's mercy will just come upon me. And I had to answer him after the class. It took me a minute to think about it. But if Hashem has this infinite mercy, is it just like available for anyone who could just grab onto it by like sort of throwing out this phrase? So the answer is no. There's like sort of different ways to access it. First of all, you can't say those words unless you have a minyan. And even in the minyan, you can't just say those words every time you want to like summon a minyan. We'll just say those words. You have to get to a certain point in the prayer after Shemona Esrei and like reaching a place. And then even then, there's different days when you say those words. And they have different power and different meanings. For example, it's known that in Tzfas, right, there's a whole sefer called Chesed Avraham from Avram Azulai, who was one of the students of the Arizal who lived here and wrote about Tzfas. And he said that in Tzfas, the 13 attributes of mercy shine all the time. This is like, right, we spoke about it on Shabbos a little bit. Elul, this whole it's even a bigger question than the Maimer, right? In Elul, the 13 attributes of mercy, why is it a weekday? In Tzfas, you could be in the bathroom, okay? The 13 attributes of mercy are shining in this city, in these little boundary, 24/7, 365 days a year. But obviously, there's different levels, right? There's different levels to these 13 attributes of mercy. Are they shining in full? Are they dressed down? Sometimes they're mamish hidden. So the idea is that there's stages to this level of this king. And in Elul, he sort of starts to peek out. These attributes which could come into a state of full revelation. At this moment, they haven't yet come into a state of full revelation. What they are doing is like they're emerging in their origin inside of Hashem, that the like sort of source of these attributes are coming to a state of emergence inside of him before they actually extend themselves to us. It's like think about it as like a young man's like just beginning of his beard, right? It hasn't really come into the full state of revelation yet, but it's out there. And you can see it, and it's starting, and therefore you can go to it, and you can address it, but it hasn't yet really come to you.
So is the peak of this Sukkot or your Kippur? Peak of this Rachamim starting at all?
The peak of the Rachamim coming out is on Yom Kippur, but then there's like a process then of essentially love. So this is sort of the conclusion of Hashem showing us the utility of His fear. It's the fear of God. The intention is not to scare us and judge us, but so that we can have awe of Him. And then, V'yaminu techabkeni, the rest of the verse, which says His left hand is under my head, the rest of the verse comes along and says that His right hand embraces me. The right hand is the sukkah. So that's the idea of the right, is love. It's a different revelation. It's also a revelation of infinite light, but it's a revelation of love as opposed to fear.
What's the difference between a smiling face and a laughing face?
That is also something we're going to get very deep into in the Rebbe's explanations. In the Alter Rebbe's Maimer, he gives the mashal and he moves on. The Rebbe will delve deeply into every little word of this mashal and tell us all kinds of mysteries that we never knew were there. I'm not going to spoil it for us. Let's just do one thing at a time. Okay, so Kihine, right after the period there, Kihine Ya'er Hashem Panavi Lecha Shu Inyan Ha'aras Yud Gimel Midos. Now this notion that we say in the priestly blessing, Ya'er Hashem Panavi Lecha, which means Hashem will shine His face upon you, right? Which is the 13 attributes of mercy, right? We're associating a few things here. What's so special about the Birchas Kohanim? That we like search around for a Kohen, and after the whole thing is over, we make sure we put a carpet under him, and we close our eyes. We can't look at this revelation, right? And we sing songs afterwards of praise. We're so excited. You know, if you ever noticed, like we do a big song for Sim Shalom when there's a Kohen. When there's not, you just finish the davening, right? What's so exciting? Because the Kohen is a conduit for these very 13 attributes of mercy. And that's what it says, Ya'er Hashem Panav Elecha. He's there to be a conduit to this level of beyond creation, that Hashem's face will shine upon you, His face being His panim, His panimius. And this is the shine of the 13 attributes, Sheyeh panim b'panim, which means that we should bring ourselves to a state of face to face.
How is panim? How's the face panimius?
The word panim comes from the same word panimius. Panim, panimius.
Yeah, but panimius is your most internal thing. Your face is.
The face is actually what expresses your panimius, right? How do I know if you're angry or sad or happy or, it's from your panim. So you have, and also why is the word panim a plural? You have face, but you're saying, whenever you say a person's face in Hebrew, you're saying your faces. It's interesting, right? And so it's because essentially your face is like just an immediate reaction of your panemius, what you're feeling, etc. So fine. So we want the idea. What he's saying here now is that we want to go and receive Hashem's face because those 13 attributes of mercy are emerging, which is Hashem's face, His panemius. And the idea is that He's not shining it all the way down to you, but rather He's just sort of dangling it like a carrot. And therefore, it's a call to action from you. He brings His face, you should bring your face. Go face Hashem, panim b'panim, right? That your panemius should greet His panemius. Dahainu means what? Yair gilui panemius ratzoni yisbarach l'makar neshamas Yisrael, right? That what you're hoping for is that Hashem will shine His panemius ratzon, right? His innermost will. What's Hashem's innermost will? Not to create the world, right? But rather to bring infinite goodness from His inner essence into this world. In other words, the 13 attributes of mercy, the concept of them is that into a finite world should be presented His true inner desire, which is the infinite revelation. So that's Hashem's panemius. And what we're looking for here, when we want to go face to face, is that the revelation of Hashem's innermost will is shining at that time to the source of the souls of Israel, right? But how? Al yidei sheyeh ikar panemius ratzonu elav. But you have to bring it out, right? You have to sort of show your face, right? The king is in the field, but you don't have to go see him. But if you will go see him, he will receive you, and you'll become face to face with the king. So if you want to get the king's face to shine on you at this time, it's available. It's emerged, but it requires you to go show your face.
What's Limkor, Rabbi?
What's that?
Limkor?
To the source.
Oh.
Now, what does it mean to show your face? How do you show your face to Hashem? What's your panemius? So just like Hashem, right? He is like an external will, and he has an internal will. Hashem's external will is to create the world, right? It's seemingly what Hashem wants is a world. But that's not really what he wants. That's like a state of separateness. What he really wants is, after that state of separateness is there, is to then bind it back to him and shine the godliness into that world. So what's your external will? Worldliness, right? In other words, your external will is basically borrowing from the playbook of Hashem. You live a life, like a normal life, where you're just busy with your own matters, and it creates externalities. But what's your internal will? That all of your life in this world should be bound up with a revelation of God. How do you do that? Torah mitzvahs 24/7, right? That your real inner will of a Jew is to do Hashem's bidding, is to be one with God, to create this oneness. So that's your face. That's called your real panemius. So Hashem finds himself in the field, which means he's like, my face is available to you if you want to come and see it. I will show you my face. I'll show you revelations of God. But only if you want to. I'm not going to it's just the emergence of the king in the field. He's not in his palace where his dread and awe is upon the whole kingdom yet. He's just emerging. But if you want to see it, you bring your A game. What's your A game? How we're supposed to act in Elul, right? We're supposed to wake up and realize that all of your shtuyot is not really you, and come forward with your true inner divine self and serve Hashem with your full heart. L'dafka bo b'leva nefesh me'umka deliba. If you want to act the actual words, cling to Him with heart and soul from the depths of your heart, b'mesiris nefesh, with total self-sacrifice, as it says elsewhere. That's called face to face. That's it.
Thank you.
We will hold here.